Chapter 785. After catching up with Nangongzhe, Mashiro confirmed that he and Nangongzhe were completely out of the ninja coalition's surveillance. Then he immediately said to Nangongzhe, "What's the matter with this Orochimaru?" Looking at him just now, he already knew that we were stalling for time. But why was he so ambiguous, messing with our thoughts and fooling the ninja allied forces? Is he on the side of the ninja coalition or on our side? As if he had been holding it in for a long time, Mashiro directly spat out all the doubts in his heart to Nangongzhe like a machine gun. Facing Mashiro's doubts, Nangongzhe seemed to understand at this moment, and directly turned to Mashiro and said, "Actually, you are right. What Orochimaru wants to do is to maintain this ambiguous state. Now, not only us, but even the ninja coalition also has a lot of complaints about Orochimaru. After all, in the process of the peace talks just now, Orochimaru clearly refuted my face. This kind of thing is naturally no problem in normal times, but the situation is that the Bloodcloth Pavilion is strong, and the ninja coalition is weak. Once I start to lose my calm because of Orochimaru's deliberate provocation, then the ninja coalition will suffer more losses in the end. But now, whether it is us or the ninja coalition, we won't directly fall out with Orochimaru. For the ninja coalition, Orochimaru's identity is too special. Woodleaf Village, which has lost the important combat power of the fourth Hokage, has almost become the place where the Sannin has rich qualifications and strength, and Orochimaru is quite proficient in tactics and has a reputation among the Sannin. As for us, we are now not sure to what extent Orochimaru has guessed the plan we are carrying out, and whether there is anything we can't deal with, so we don't dare to act rashly. Maybe this is what Orochimaru wants, whether it is the ninja allied forces or the Bloodcloak Pavilion. There is no way to do anything to him, and he is constantly moving between our forces to see some of his plans." At this moment, Nangongzhe was hugging the Heaven's Calamity Sword in his arms. His face seemed to be covered by a layer of frost, and he was extremely cold. He kept telling Mashiro his guesses. There were still a lot of things that couldn't be proven with direct evidence. But Nangongzhe and Mashiro weren't the police, so they didn't need such sufficient evidence. Nangongzhe and Mashiro only needed a direction to defend themselves, and Nangongzhe's explanation was obviously quite possible. Orochimaru is indeed a famous madman in the shinobi world. He can even play such a dangerous trick in such a situation. Others were afraid of getting burned, but Orochimaru was directly in the middle of the two fire pits, and he was having a lot of fun. Is this guy really not afraid that he will directly suffer the consequences of his own actions because of such a reckless and dangerous move, and end up dead? Mashiro's mind echoed a lot of information he learned about Orochimaru, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt how crazy Orochimaru was. Most dangerous people are dangerous to others, but crazy people are often crazy about themselves. When a person completely disregards life and death and losses in order to achieve their own goals, who can stop such an existence? Death of body and Tao? For Orochimaru, his own life was never important. The only thing he cared about was his pursuit of truth. Previously, Orochimaru became quite delirious because of the defects in his soul. But now, Orochimaru directly repaired his incomplete soul after resurrection for unknown reasons. The current Orochimaru is no longer as crazy and persistent as before, but instead, he added a layer of rationality to his madness and persistence. It is this rationality that restrains Orochimaru's madness and persistence, making him more dangerous than when he was crazy. Now, everything Orochimaru does is no longer controlled by his own emotions, but by his own almost cold rationality. He starts to plan step by step, observing all the changes in his eyes, putting all the factors that may affect the overall situation in his heart. Everything Orochimaru does now is to achieve his own pursuit. No exception. When Nangongzhe's last few words fell on the ground, Mashiro's back was directly covered by a cold feeling. A completely rational person, and all his actions are to achieve his own goals. Just thinking about it, Mashiro can't help but become afraid. It seems that we also have to speed up our plan. Although today's operation did not fully achieve our expectations, it is enough to cause enough shock to the ninja allied forces. What we need to do now is to use our advantage to get more benefits. Now, the ninja allied forces will definitely speed up their reinforcements again and again. Once the reinforcements arrive, they will definitely attack us directly without mercy. Now, we are stalling for time here, but the action team we sent out is really racing against time. Only by taking more rapid action can we perfectly achieve our goal in the shortest time. Standing beside Nangong, when he heard how terrible an enemy like Orochimaru is, Mishiro's thoughts also drifted to the two action teams sent by Nangong to the Land of Wind and the Land of Earth. After all, for the Bloodrobe Pavilion now, the most important thing is not himself, but the two action teams sent out by Nangong. Hearing Mishiro's suggestion, Nangong also nodded, apparently agreeing with Mishiro's statement. The current situation was already very critical. What they needed was to take care of everything and consider all aspects of the matter clearly. Otherwise, if there is any mistake, it will directly lead to the loss of the whole game. Okay, after returning to the main tent, immediately give orders to the two action teams. Make sure they capture the Land of Wind and the Land of Earth as soon as possible so that they can complete their plan as soon as possible. Only when the Bloodrobe Pavilion stabilizes in the ninja world can we really achieve our goal. Chapter 786. Time quietly slipped away from the ninja allied forces and the Bloodcloak Pavilions waiting. The ninja allied forces were still constantly urging their reinforcements, and even to the point where they didn't care about the consumption. And the Bloodcloak Pavilion also began to do their best to take advantage of the fact that the ninja allied forces had transferred a large number of living forces from their own territory, constantly attacking cities and seizing territories. Although the Bloodcloak Pavilion has only been on the campaign for a few days, with their almost crushing power, they directly flattened the Land of Wind and the Land of Earth. No city could last for too long in front of the Bloodcloak Pavilion. Without the unified leadership of the daimyo, without the protection of powerful ninjas, there is no way to effectively protect their homeland by relying on the relatively scattered civilian encirclement forces in various cities and weak bureaucratic groups. After all, in the entire ninja world, the military and political division is very clear. The political division is all controlled by the bureaucratic group headed by the daimyo, and the military is all controlled by the ninja group headed by the kage. Almost all the military officers have undergone a certain period of training in the ninja village of their own country, but the only way to deal with ninjas is to use ninjas. Other methods are just small things. Some civilians can also use the means to deal with ninjas. The people of the ninja village naturally won't easily teach these military officers who rely on the political groups to exist. Otherwise, if one day those ambitious military officers use such means to kill ninjas because of fear, wouldn't it be a terrible loss? Therefore, for various reasons, in fact, a large number of city guards stationed in the cities of the ninja world have actually become an existence that can only deal with civilians and maintain the order of ordinary people. However, even if they continue to flatten all the way, the size of the Land of Wind and the Land of Earth and the limited number of people of the ninja allied forces still pose an extremely great obstacle. Many disciples of the Bloodcloak Pavilion are actually in a state of exhaustion at this moment, but in order to complete the task assigned by the Bloodcloak Pavilion, they can only continue to move forward. At the beginning of the attack, the Bloodcloak Pavilion has already determined the battle policy. That is, after attacking a city, directly imprison the people who have the ability to resist, and directly impose martial law on the entire city. Except for the disciples of the Bloodcloak Pavilion, no one is allowed to enter or leave the city, even the soldiers of the Small Country Alliance. Naturally, this was not done without a purpose. The Blood Garment Pavilion wanted to use this method to seal off the news that the Wind Country and Earth Country had been invaded. Can be said that so far the whole melee plan has been very smooth. Those ninjas left behind in the hinterland of various countries haven't received the slightest news of their country being attacked. However, no one was a fool. There was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. Under the continuous attacks of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, the land controlled by the ninja village was getting closer and closer. And in the cities built on these lands, ninjas gradually appeared, causing some resistance to the continued advancement of the Bloodcloak Pavilion. However, such resistance was not something worth paying attention to. After all, compared to unorganized ninja squads or even single ninjas, the Bloodcloak Pavilion was now engaged in a large-scale army battle. No matter how strange an individual's ability is, when facing the simultaneous attack of hundreds of thousands of people at the same time, it is impossible to have much room to play. After the Bloodcloak Pavilion once again captured a city of the Wind Country like before, after detaining the people with combat strength in the city, the Blood Cloak Pavilion withdrew from the city and continued to advance to the next city. At this moment, 2 prison guards from the Small Country Alliance were sitting outside the prison and chatting. The 2 prison guards were sitting at a square table at this moment. An oil lamp was lit on the square table, bringing some light to the slightly dim prison. In front of the 2 prison guards were a wine cup, and on the small square table there were also a few dishes. The 2 prison guards seemed to be drinking to their heart's content at this moment, and their voices became slightly louder. It must be said that this group of internal strength cultivators of the Blood Cloak Pavilion is really powerful. They can directly capture such a high city without any effort. Even if it was the people of the 5 great ninja villages, they would have to spend more effort, right? A slightly younger prison guard looked at his colleague sitting opposite him and said with some emotion in his heart. The other jailer, who looked slightly older, looked at his colleague who was talking about the blood clothing pavilion in an unrespectful tone. He put his finger on his lips and made a shoo sound to his colleague. He seemed to be a little nervous as he looked around and said to his colleague, "Sir, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. Are you looking for death? How could you say something like that? Don't you know that our country's current reputation is actually supported by the Blood Garment Pavilion? We obey the Blood Garment Pavilion's every word. Even if we don't consider the name of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, we can't afford to offend any of them. Take a look at the previous battlefield. This group of capable people seemed to be born for battle. They directly charged through the rain of bullets and arrows. In the end, there were almost no casualties. Now it seems that whether it is the Wind Country or the Earth Country, they are slowly being controlled by the Blood Cloak Pavilion. When the time comes, the status of our small countries, which were originally bullied by the 5 great countries, will naturally rise. After all, the manpower of the Blood Cloak Pavilion is limited. At that time, based on the merits of our respective countries, we will definitely be rewarded. Now, what we should do is to do our job well and wait for the good days in the future." Hearing the elder's reprimand, the young jailer covered his mouth in fear. He obviously realized that what he said just now was a little too frivolous. After being reprimanded by the elder, the young jailer hurriedly smiled apologetically at the elder and said, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. Brother, don't be angry. You and I have been partners for many years. I only spoke so casually in front of you. How would I dare to speak like this in front of others? Let's drink. Let's drink. These things are not things that small people like us can worry about. This cup is not only to apologize for my previous careless words, but also to wish the lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion all the way to success. I'll drink. Seeing that the young warden seemed to be on the right track, the old warden didn't argue with the young warden anymore. He raised his wine cup and took a sip, suppressing his somewhat chaotic state of mind. Chapter 787. Just as the 2 guards were drinking and eating, in the corner of the prison, an old man who looked very old and had a crooked body suddenly flashed a glimmer of light in his eyes under the shadow of his headscarf. Most of the prisoners in this prison were people with martial arts. It was quite strange that an old man could mix in with such a group of powerful people. When the Blood Cloak Pavilion attacked this city, they actually encountered a relatively tenacious resistance. However, after all, the comprehensive quality of the city guards was here. No matter how tenacious the resistance was, it was almost impossible to turn the tide when encountering the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, who were far stronger than ordinary people. After the city completely fell, the people of the Blood Cloak Pavilion naturally learned the reason why the resistance here was relatively fierce from the captives of the city guards. When the Blood Cloak Pavilion attacked, it was this old man who stepped forward and showed his extraordinary combat experience, commanding the city guards to constantly resist the invasion of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. After receiving such news, the people of the Blood Cloak Pavilion naturally did not relax in the slightest. They immediately organized people to directly find this old man. After all, such a person who was proficient in war and had a lot of experience in fighting the enemy was too dangerous. Even if such a person was an old man who was about to die, they could not let him go. When this old man was faced with the encirclement of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, He seemed to accept his fate and was directly arrested by the people of the Bloodcloak Pavilion and temporarily detained in such a prison. This old man was none other than one of the two elders of the Sunagakure, Ebizo Hai. He was also the younger brother of Chio, who once resurrected Gaara, and the second grandfather of Sasori of the Red Sand. After Chio used forbidden jutsu to save Gaara's life, Ebizo Hai was quite disheartened and was unwilling to intervene in anything in the Sunagakure. Overnight, the place where Chio and Ebizo lived was directly destroyed, and Ebizo was nowhere to be found. No matter how hard the Sand Village searched, they couldn't find any trace of Ebizo. Ebizo, who had disappeared, was actually hiding in such a city located in the Land of Wind. He built a simple house outside the city and lived there, waiting for the day when he ran out of oil and went to find his sister. Even after the outbreak of the Fourth Shinobi World War, the disheartened Ebizo didn't return to the Sunagakure. When the Blood Garment Pavilion began to attack the city, Old Haizong was the first person in the city to notice the Blood Garment Pavilion's actions. Although Ebizo is not so willing to get involved in the disputes of the shinobi world, this city is actually an important economic center of the Land of Wind. After all, a large area of the Wind Country was covered by the desert. The place where such a tall city could be built was naturally a large oasis, supporting a large number of people and gathering a huge amount of wealth. After all, the Land of Wind is a place that he and his sister have been guarding for their whole life. The war against the outside world can be successful, but the Land of Wind must not collapse directly because of various reasons. It is precisely because of this that Ebizo directly stepped forward to lead the city guards in the city to resist the attack of the Blood Garment Pavilion. However, in the face of the strong offensive of the Blood Garment Pavilion, Ebizo himself was already disheartened and was ready to die. Naturally, he didn't prepare enough poison to resist the entire ninja allied forces. The city's defensive line resisted for a moment before the ninja allied forces tore a hole, and a large number of ninja allied forces directly attacked the city. However, according to Old Hai's observation, the Blood Garment Pavilion disciples did not directly clash with the civilians after invading the city. Instead, they attacked the city guards from both sides. They even sent a portion of their members into the city to control the civilian areas. Although their actions were rather violent, it seemed that the Blood Garment Pavilion disciples were very restrained. They did not start to burn, kill, and loot directly. Old Hai's eyes widened as he looked at the Blood Garment Pavilion disciples. It was precisely because of the extreme restraint of the Blood Garment Pavilion that Ebizo was more aware of the Blood Garment Pavilion's plan. War has always been because of two reasons: plunder or conquest. When the people who started the war occupied a city, they didn't think about how to accumulate wealth, but when they pacified the people, then their purpose naturally became clear. However, how large-scale the war was and what was the purpose of the Blood Garment Pavilion, just relying on such a battle wasn't enough to obtain enough information. Therefore, Ebizo hid his strength and was directly captured by the people of the Blood Garment Pavilion without any resistance. A person like him who suddenly appeared and helped the city guards to resist the attack of the Blood Garment Pavilion. As long as the Blood Garment Pavilion was ambitious in their heart, they would certainly interrogate him, recruit him, or kill him. They would certainly see the leader of the Blood Garment Pavilion attack and pry into some secrets. However, what was beyond Ebizo's expectation was that the people of the Blood Garment Pavilion didn't pay attention to an existence like him at all. They directly detained him and some people who had a certain strength in the city. After that, they directly left a large number of soldiers who seemed to be from a small country to detain them and directly withdrew from the city to prepare to attack the next city. Although it's not very similar to what I expected, but I also understand what the Blood Garment Pavilion is selling in the gourd. I didn't expect that the Blood Cloak Pavilion, which suddenly appeared at the beginning, would have such a plot. Swallowing the Land of Wind and the Land of Earth, which is directly swallowing half of the shinobi world into their stomach. What a big appetite! Ebizo sat in the corner. Although his complexion didn't change much, one of his hands directly stretched into his sleeve. A colorless and odorless fine powder silently drifted out from Old Hai Zhang's sleeves. The prison wasn't spacious to begin with, and with the addition of a lot of people squeezed inside, it seemed to be even more compact. After this fine powder drifted out from Ebizo's sleeve, it directly rushed into the nostrils of everyone in the prison. At first, these people didn't have any special reaction, but as time passed, everyone's eyes became slightly red, and their breathing became extremely rapid. Chapter 788. Although the breathing of the person in the cell was getting more and more rapid, and his own breathing was also becoming extremely violent, the two jailers who had been sitting outside the cell and drinking until they were in a daze also noticed that something was wrong in the cell at this moment. However, when a person was drunk, their mind would be somewhat numb. The two jailers just pulled out the long sabers hanging from their waists and slammed them on the iron bars of the prison, hoping to let the prisoners know that they were the ones holding the sabers in their hands. As long as they wanted to, the prisoners' lives were in their hands. Both of them had been prison guards for many years, but now it didn't have the effect that they had hoped for. Not only were the prisoners not frightened by the two jailers at this moment, but they also seemed to be aware of the danger of the two jailers. They directly stared at the two jailers with fierce eyes, which made the two jailers feel a chill in their hearts. "You're just a group of prisoners. How dare you look at me like that? It seems that I really have to teach you a lesson. I'll let you know that the long saber in my hand is not just for decoration." The young jailer was the first to be unable to withstand the pressure. Before the older jailer could stop him, he directly stabbed his long saber into the prison. But such a casual stab directly pierced into the body of one of the prisoners. Feeling that he had stabbed something, the young jailer immediately withdrew his long saber. What a joke! The jailers were not executioners, they were only responsible for guarding the prisoners. Although they also had some interrogation skills, they couldn't really kill. When the young jailer withdrew his long saber, hot blood directly spilled on his shoes. Even through a layer of cloth, the young jailer could feel how hot the blood was on his shoes. "What the hell are you doing? We are just jailers, how can we casually attack the prisoners? If there are any casualties, how can we explain it to the higher-ups?" When the matter involved his job, the older jailer directly reprimanded the young jailer. However, the young jailer, who was usually reprimanded directly after being reprimanded by the older jailer, or directly apologized to the older jailer. At this moment, the young jailer's eyes were particularly empty, as if he was frightened by his own behavior. Seeing that the young jailer was scared silly, the older jailer didn't bother to reprimand this young man. He directly turned his head to check whether the prisoners in the prison were dead or not. If someone was really dead, then he must find a way to dispose of the corpse, otherwise it would really lead to a disaster. But when the older jailer cast his eyes on the prisoners in the prison, he was also shocked by the prisoners in the prison. These prisoners seemed to be stimulated by the blood that splashed out when the young jailer stabbed one of the prisoners. Their eyes directly turned scarlet, and the whites of their eyes were completely replaced by scarlet blood. Each of them was emitting an extremely dangerous aura. "You, all of you better behave yourselves. Right now, we are all in prison and there is a huge army guarding outside. What kind of trouble can all of you cause? All of you better stay here, and maybe you will have a chance to survive. Otherwise, the army outside will directly crush us. How can you stop them with your weak kung fu?" The elderly warden used almost all of his strength to shout at the prisoners. However, how could these prisoners who had lost their minds and only had the desire to destroy and fight understand his words? Instead, they opened their mouths and roared at the elderly warden in an incomprehensible manner. Old Hai was the elder of Sunagakure, so naturally, he was also extremely proficient in poison. However, these people were not poisoned. Instead, it was a type of tonic or stimulant. But as long as an ordinary person inhaled a highly diluted mouthful of this tonic, they would be able to recover their spirit. At this moment, Old Hai directly increased the dosage of this tonic to more than 5 times the daily dosage. This dosage directly caused the prisoners to completely lose their self-consciousness, and their brain nerves to lose their sense of pain, which doubled their combat effectiveness. Seeing that these prisoners were almost enraged, Old Hai's hands that were hidden in his sleeves were all stretched out at this moment. Chakra condensed at the fingertips of Old Hai, and these chakra threads wrapped around the hard iron bars under Old Hai's control. The highly condensed chakra threads had become extremely tough and sharp at this moment. Almost with a flick of his hand, these sturdy iron bars directly turned into iron rods scattered on the ground, making clanking sounds. After the cage was broken, the prisoners who had been injected with excessive amounts of stimulants rushed out of the cage and pounced on the stunned senior warden and the dazed young warden. Once a person loses his mind, he will be controlled by his instincts, and there is no difference between a man and a beast. Old Hai was very clear that there was a large army stationed outside this prison, and because of his age, his strength had declined to the point where it was difficult to directly leave under the encirclement of so many people. Therefore, Old Hai directly used drugs on the prisoners who stood up to resist the Blood Cloak Pavilion, causing them to fall into a state of madness. However, the blood sacrifice of these people was bound to be valuable. Old Hai had decided to directly go to the frontline station of the Allied forces after leaving here, and let the ninjas of the Wind Country and the Earth Country immediately return to their own country to protect their own country's territory, so that the Blood Cloak Pavilion's plan could not be carried out. One by one, the civilian warriors who had lost their mind and sacrificed themselves for the Wind Country were sacrificed by Old Hai's plan. They were directly thrown out to attract the troops of the small countries left in the city by the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Old Hai directly used ninjutsu to merge into the sand, using the actions of these people to cover his tracks. When the troops of the small countries saw that these people dared to directly break out of the prison, they also directly launched an attack on these people who had lost their mind. After a series of attacks, they finally eliminated all these people, but Old Hai's whereabouts were unknown at this moment. Chapter 789. Sitting on his chair, Nangongzhi didn't read the battle reports from the Wind and Earth Country like usual. Instead, he sat quietly in front of the table without saying a word. His eyes just stared at the curtain of his tent, as if waiting for some news. After a while, Mashiro walked into Nangongzhi's tent with a few thin pieces of paper. Seeing Nangongzhi staring directly at the entrance of the tent, Mashiro gently waved the few pieces of paper in his hand a few times, then said to Nangongzhi, "The surveillance information from the ninja allied forces came." Hearing Mashiro's words, Nangongzhi nodded, then said to Mashiro, "I won't read it. Just tell me directly." Knowing that Nangongzhi doesn't like to read such a slightly complicated written report, Mashiro directly put the paper in his hand on the table, then directly said to Nangongzhi, "I have already read this information on the way here, then I will repeat it to you. This time, when our people were monitoring the ninja allied forces, they didn't encounter any resistance. The ninja allied forces seemed to be deliberately letting our people know what's going on in their camp. They didn't hold back and directly let our people go deep into their camp. Early this morning, the higher-ups of the ninja allied forces had already appeared directly behind their tents, as if they were waiting for something. They also prepared a large number of gifts and piled them directly behind their tents. Shortly after that, the reinforcements from the 5 major countries gathered directly behind them and entered the ninja allied forces' tents in batches. And after these people entered the camp of the ninja allied forces, it was obvious that the ninjas of the allied forces were already preparing for war. It's almost certain that they will attack us as soon as they are ready. The long-awaited reinforcements of the ninja allied forces have all arrived here at this moment, which is not good news for the blood-robed pavilion. After all, the blood-robed pavilion hasn't completely completed the annexation plan of the Wind and Earth Country. However, Nangongzhi didn't look worried at all. Instead, he handed a report from the border guard force on his table to Mashiro's direction. During this time, you have been paying attention to the situation of the ninja allied forces, and I have been paying attention to the information of our 2 special operations teams invading the land of Wind and the land of Earth, but 2 days ago, I received a border notification that I was very concerned about. This is a letter of apology from the border of the country of Wind. The content of the letter is very simple. 2 days ago, the border troops formed by the disciples of the Blood Clothing Pavilion and the Alliance of Small Countries were attacked by a person. Moreover, this person directly broke through. Because of their mistake, these guards sent a letter of apology to me, asking for punishment. But I didn't directly punish them. Instead, I directly sent them a letter of condolence, and the reason why I did this is that in the letter of apology they sent me, they described in detail the characteristics and appearance of the person who broke through the border. Nangongzhi had always been a person who would reward those who did well and punish those who did wrong. But this time, on the surface, it seemed that the border guards of the Wind Country had failed in their duties, but Nangongzhi actually sent them a letter of condolence. Perhaps in the eyes of others, Nangongzhi's approach was to stabilize the people's hearts, but Mashiro knew that Nangongzhi must have his own reasons for doing so. After opening the letter of apology from Nangongzhi, Mashiro directly skipped the boring words of admitting guilt and asking for punishment, and directly flipped the letter to the appendix at the end. In the appendix, there was a portrait drawn by the blood-robed pavilion disciples according to the observation at that time, and after seeing such a portrait, Mashiro was suddenly slightly stunned. He had a slightly stooped body, a white headscarf, long white eyebrows, and a large robe. Even though he was dressed like this and looked like an ordinary old man, Mashiro felt a sense of déjà vu from him. As if to confirm something, Mashiro then looked at the battle records of such a person beside the portrait. Using a variety of poisons with unknown effects. Extremely rich combat experience. Very good at finding the weakness of others and attacking it. This person could be? Suddenly, the name of a person who had disappeared without a trace appeared in Mashiro's mind. After hearing Mashiro's uncertain voice, Nangongzhi also nodded to Mashiro, apparently telling Mashiro that his guess was correct. I'll give the order now. Those guards who let this fellow escape will be punished in the harshest way possible. A person with such an identity directly rushed out of our line of defense. Wouldn't there be a huge loophole in our plan? If such a person directly entered the camp of the ninja allied forces, then our plan will be exposed instantly. Now that our crusade against the Wind and Earth country is not over yet, we must not let the ninja allied forces directly return to support us. Seeing Mashiro's anxious look, Nangongzhi directly stood up from his seat, walked to Mashiro's side, and said to Mashiro, "Mashiro, don't panic. Listen to me first." When Nangongzhi put his hand on Mashiro's shoulder and spoke to Mashiro with a voice that didn't have a trace of panic. Instead, it was as if victory was in his grasp. Mashiro, who was a bit confused because of the sudden impact of the information, calmed down a bit at this moment and turned to look at Nangongzhi, who was standing beside him. When I first saw this information, I was also worried about how big of an impact the appearance of a person like Ebizo would have on us. But when I calmed down and looked at this information again, I found that although this situation seems to be dangerous, there is almost no disadvantage for us. Even if a person like Ebizo suddenly appeared in the ninja allied forces, it is a great advantage for our plan. Therefore, I didn't give any punishment to the border guards, but instead rewarded them. Chapter 790. When we see how much harm such a situation may bring to us, we ignore an important factor, and that is time. Seeing that Mashiro has calmed down, Nangongzhi also began to slowly explain to Mashiro why he didn't punish the border mixed forces for their negligence, but instead issued a rather comforting circular letter. The reality that we are facing now is that our troops have yet to completely occupy the Wind and Earth countries' territories. Therefore, we need to buy some time for them to complete their predetermined objectives. So under the inertia of thinking, we will think that such a task of delaying the world will inevitably fall on us. Only by ensuring that our plan is in the dark can we make the ninja allied forces pay attention to us and buy enough time for the other two teams to invade the Wind and Earth country. But when we jump out of the inertia of thinking, can we assign such a task of delaying the world to others? After all, Mashiro is not a stupid person. When Nangongzhi's words have already reached such a situation, he naturally quickly understood what Nangongzhi meant by assigning the task of delaying the world to others. You mean, in fact, we can let the ninja allied forces drag us down? Hearing that Mashiro finally understood his meaning, Nangongzhi also nodded directly, then continued to say to Mashiro, "Yes, that's right. There are many people in the ninja allied forces who are injured. Although they have been recuperating for a while, they have not fully recovered. And these ninjas who rush to the battlefield under the repeated urging of the ninja allied forces will naturally not be so energetic. And in such a situation, once a person with a very high status like Ebizo comes to the ninja allied forces camp and says to all the ninja allied forces, 'You are all a group of fools. These people from the Bloodcloth Pavilion have already taken advantage of this time to steal our home. Why don't you hurry back to rescue them?' What kind of reaction will the ninjas of the ninja allied forces have?" Listening to Nangongzhi's words, Mashiro also began to put himself in the position of an ordinary ninja in the ninja allied forces to think. The more he thought about it, the more the anger in his heart became stronger and stronger. Although ninjas have always claimed that they can get rid of their emotions from their mind, how many people can do this? Once such an accident happens to the ninja allied forces, what kind of reaction will so many ninjas have? Moreover, the country of wind and country of earth were being attacked. Would the other three countries spare no effort to help these two countries that were once estranged from them? Even if the high-level ninjas can see and agree to such an action, will the ordinary ninjas at the grassroots be able to put down such hatred and continue to fight for other countries? As the saying goes, die a friend is better than the poor. Now the countries that are about to be destroyed are the land of wind and the land of earth. What does it have to do with the other countries? Don't tell me that if the lips are gone, the teeth will be cold. Once the Blood Garment Pavilion really swallows the country of wind and the country of earth, how long will it take to digest these two countries that are vast in size but have very ordinary resources and then pose a threat to the other three countries? Not to say hundreds of years, but a few decades is certain, and a few decades is enough for the other three countries to prepare for it. After all, the establishment of the 5 major ninja villages is only a few decades. If there is a few more decades, the ninja villages in the other 3 countries will naturally develop to an extremely powerful level. Even if the people in the ninja allied forces reach a consensus and are willing to rescue the land of wind and the land of earth together, how fast can the ninjas who have already consumed a lot of energy reach the land of wind and the land of earth? Should they rescue the land of earth or the land of wind first? These are all questions that are directly placed in front of the ninja allied forces. When a person is faced with a decision that involves their own fundamental interests, everyone only cares about what they can get. As for what others do, what does it have to do with them? The more Mashiro thought about it, the more he found that the arrival of Ebizo was actually not a bad thing for the Bloodcloth Pavilion. On the contrary, it may be more beneficial for the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Even if this is the case, we still have to guard against the ninja allied forces who will directly kill us, the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion who are staying here. After all, I am the altar lord of the pristine gold altar of the Blood Garment Pavilion, and you are the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, Gonggong. Once the two of us die here, it will definitely cause chaos within the Blood Garment Pavilion. It seems that you and I need to carefully discuss when we should leave with the disciples here. After all, Mashiro was Mashiro. Although his heart was full of joy, he was completely unaffected by this joy in his heart, and soon found what kind of loopholes in such a plan. Yes, we do need to carefully discuss this point. If we can't grasp the time, although I am confident that I can take you away from here, but there is no way for the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion to get enough time to move. I have a little idea here, we need to continue to discuss it. After saying that, Nangongja pulled Mashiro to sit on a chair in the tent and began to talk about some of his plans. In the ninja allied forces, at this moment, everyone was full of a kind of elation. After all, during this period of time, Nangongja directly pulled the ninja allied forces for so-called negotiations, and put pressure on the ninja allied forces again and again, and everyone was very keenly aware that Nangongja's strength had become more and more powerful. This kind of pressure falling on the ninja allied forces was a bit too heavy, as if there was a sword of Damocles floating above their heads, and at any time it would directly fall from the sky and behead them. Now that their own side's reinforcements had finally arrived, everyone naturally became uncontrollably excited. Chapter 791. While the ninja allied forces were constantly preparing for the war, in the Sunagakure camp, a person was respectfully welcomed into a tent located in the center of the Sunagakure camp, which was only slightly smaller than the ninja allied forces' main tent. Gaara was sitting in his seat at the moment, his eyebrows tightly knitted together, looking very dignified. This time, Gaara really wanted to get enough benefits in the battle with the Bloodcloak Pavilion, so he directly took out the Sunagakure's capital. Although Gaara didn't regret his decision, such a situation still made Gaara very nervous. He was afraid that, because of his own problems, Sunagakure would fall out of the top 5 shinobi villages ranking. He didn't know how long it would take for Sunagakure to be submerged in the torrent of history. His eyes swept across the topographic map of this battlefield again and again, Gaara's mind constantly recalled the attack plan that had been set before, trying to find loopholes in it to reduce the danger that the Sunagakure ninjas might face. But just as Gaara recalled the battle plan in his mind over and over again, and from time to time, his hand stroked the map in front of him, and even used his sand control ability to directly evolve into a sand table to constantly carry out tactical deduction, a voice sounded outside his tent. Reporting to the Kazekage-sama, a distinguished guest has come to visit. When he was concentrating on the Sunagakure's plan, he was suddenly disturbed. In fact, Gaara's heart was a little angry. Although without the influence of Shikaku, Gaara's violent character had been restrained a lot. After all, a leopard can't change its spots. Most of the time, Gaara couldn't completely control his temper. But such anger only lasted for a moment. Gaara quickly recognized his master from such a voice. It was the voice of Maki, the Kazekage's chief assistant. Even Maki, who could be said to be the most powerful person in the Sunagakure, would respectfully call him a distinguished guest. Gaara naturally wouldn't be so angry. After a little adjustment to restore his calm, Gaara waved his hands and directly dispersed the sand table in front of him. "Please come in." Gaara's voice spread out, and the curtains of his tent were lifted up. At this moment, Maki personally opened the curtain and welcomed the person behind him into Gaara's tent. The moment he saw the person who came, the suppressed anger in Gaara's heart disappeared without a trace, because the person who walked into his tent was none other than Chiyo's younger brother, the Sunagakure's old man Hai Laozo, who saved Gaara at the cost of her own life. "Hai Laozo-sama, it's been a long time. I thought you were no longer willing to come into contact with the trivial matters of the world and directly lived in seclusion. After all, he owed Chiyo's life, and Hai Laozo's status in the Sunagakure was too high. Facing such a person who worked hard and had a lot of involvement with him, Gaara naturally put down his arrogance as the Kazekage. He stood up from his seat and walked in front of Hai Laozo. This old man wants to live in seclusion and not care about the world. But the Wind Country has reached a moment of life and death. How can I, an old man who has guarded the Wind Country for a lifetime, continue to live in seclusion?" At this moment, Hai Laozong's expression was not very good. After seeing the Blood Garment Pavilion's attack on the Country of Wind and calculating the speed of the Blood Garment Pavilion's attack, Hai Laozong could already conclude that the majority of the Country of Wind had already fallen into the hands of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Fortunately, the Blood Cloak Pavilion didn't kill them, so Hai Laozo vaguely felt that he could still save the cities of the Wind Country by returning to help. After all, most of the power of the Wind Country was still relatively intact in such a battlefield. The political leader of the Wind Country, daimyo of the Wind Country, and the military leader of the Wind Country, Sunagakure Kazekage, were also very safe at this moment. As long as they could return to the Wind Country again, there was still a possibility of restoring the Wind Country again. However, Hai Laozo knew that the Wind Country had been invaded, but Gaara didn't know. Gaara listened to Hai Laozo's tone that was not particularly respectful, and his respect for Hai Laozo was greatly reduced. "I am the Kazekage of the Sunagakure village of the Wind Country. Now you, a person who has retreated to the second line and didn't even appear in the battle, dared to directly scold me for dragging the Wind Country to the brink of destruction. Isn't this a slap in the face in public?" And now Baki was here, whether it was to maintain his dignity as the Kazekage or to vent his anger at Hai Laozo's undisguised scolding. Gaara said to Hai Laozo in a very unfriendly tone, "I don't know what I did wrong to make you, an elder of the Wind Country, directly scold me like this." Hearing Gaara's unfriendly tone, old Hai glanced coldly at Gaara and said, Let's go. Do you know what happened after you directly transferred a large number of ninjas from the Wind Country?" As soon as Hai Laozo's words came out, Gaara's heart sank. After all, he transferred most of the power of the entire Sunagakure village, which may indeed damage the interests of the entire Wind Country. Without the threat of ninjas, it is very likely that there will be many rebellions in the Land of Wind, and it is naturally impossible to play a big role by relying only on those weak and flowery city guards. Seeing Gaara's sudden silence, Hai Laozo completely ignored the change in Gaara's expression at this moment. Instead, he directly glanced at Baki standing beside him. With just a glance, Baki directly left the tent, and a large number of Sunagakure ninjas directly surrounded the tent where Gaara and Hai Laozo were located to prevent anyone from eavesdropping on the conversation between Gaara and Hai Laozo. Seeing Baki leave so tactfully, Hai Laozo also said to Gaara, who was very silent in front of him, "The Blood Cloak Pavilion has led a coalition of many small countries to attack the Wind Country and the Earth Country. Although I don't know what the current situation of the Earth Country is, most of our land has fallen into the control of the Blood Cloak Pavilion." Chapter 792. Hearing Ebizo's words, Gaara's mind suddenly went blank. The Land of Wind was invaded by the Blood-Robed Pavilion, and the Land of Earth was also invaded by the Blood-Robed Pavilion? When such a news rushed into Gaara's ears, it was like a bolt from the blue for him, and his whole mind went blank. Obviously, the entire Blood-Robed Pavilion has been delayed here, so why does the Blood-Robed Pavilion still have the strength to attack the Land of Wind and the Land of Earth? Is it possible that the Blood-Robed Pavilion camp that is now blocked by the ninja allied forces is just an empty shell, and all the powerful people of the Blood-Robed Pavilion have been sent to attack the Land of Wind and the Land of Earth? Suddenly, such a thought directly broke into Gaara's mind. Such a thought also answered all the questions in Gaara's mind. Why has Nangongja been putting pressure on the ninja allied forces to delay the invasion of the Land of Earth? Why is it that every time Nangongja appears with Mashiro instead of the other blood-robed pavilion lords? Why did Nangongja not directly launch a general attack on the ninja allied forces even though he has accumulated so much strength? Instead, he waited for the reinforcements of the ninja allied forces to arrive here. He didn't attack the reinforcements, nor did he destroy the transportation, but just let the reinforcements of the ninja allied forces arrive. Even at such a time when the war is about to begin, there is still no atmosphere of preparation in the blood-robed pavilion camp. Ebizo-sama, please come with me to the main tent of the ninja allied forces. This news not only needs to be known to us, but also needs to be known to the other ninja villages. At this moment, Gaara didn't have time to worry about Ebizo's tired body after a long journey. He directly took Ebizo's hand and led him to the main tent. Gaara lifted the curtain and saw Marky, who had been loyally guarding outside his tent. He directly ordered Marky, "Let's go!" Baki, now send a few people to inform the leaders of the other 4 ninja villages and ask them to immediately go to the main tent for a discussion. But these people must keep their actions secret and don't make too much of a commotion. Now that this matter is related to the survival of our village and even the Wind Country, we must be cautious and hurry up. Do you understand what I mean? Gaara's eyes were fixed on Marky, and his eyes were full of solemnity and anxiety. Although Gaara would occasionally show a bit of irritation, Marky hadn't seen such a nervous and anxious look from Gaara for a long time. "Yes, I'll go now." Hearing Baki's response, Gaara directly left the Sunagakure's garrison and rushed toward the main camp in the center of the Ninja Coalition army. The people of the other 4 villages were all gathered outside the main camp at this moment. After meeting each other, they were quite confused. After all, Gaara's secret and anxious method of notification didn't explain anything clearly, and he directly asked the leaders of the 5 villages to come directly to the main camp. Even a fool can fully see the seriousness of the situation, but looking at the other people who seemed to be as confused as him, they immediately understood that such information should be only known by the Sunagakure, and it was very important information that may affect everyone. After confirming each other's gazes, everyone opened the tent's curtains and entered the main tent. At the moment when the curtain was opened, everyone was attracted by the scene in the tent. In the center of the main camp, Gaara has directly created a huge sand table with his sand control ability. The huge space of the main camp is almost completely occupied by the sand table at this moment. This sand table is not only the sand table of this battlefield, but the sand table of the entire ninja world. At this moment, Gaara and a stooped old man with white eyebrows stood on the sand table, representing the Wind Country, and looked at the group of people who walked into the tent. "Everyone, I have a piece of information here that is not so good to tell you. First of all, I want to declare to you that such information was personally brought back by our Sunagakure's old man Hai, and it is completely trustworthy." After saying this sentence, Gaara didn't care about the reactions of the people of the other villages. He directly told the representatives of the other 4 villages the information he had just heard from Old Man Hai, and constantly deduced the attack range of the Blood Cloak Pavilion on the sand table. Seeing that the Blood Cloak Pavilion had almost flattened the Wind Country and the Earth Country, Kitsuchi, the representative of the Earth Country, was also filled with panic at this moment. He said to Gaara, "Kazekage-sama, is what you said true? The Blood Cloak Pavilion actually sent such a powerful force to attack our country directly under our eyes, and now they are almost done with the attack." Gaara seemed to have expected that some people would not believe it, so he nodded to Old Man Hai, who was standing behind him. Old Man Hai also directly understood Gaara's meaning. He took off his slightly loose robe directly, revealing his back to the other representatives of the Ninja Coalition Army. "We have already had a confrontation with the Blood Cloak Pavilion, and I think you all know what kind of performance these internal force cultivators of the Blood Cloak Pavilion have in the battle. Everyone should take a look here. I think you should understand, right?" On Old Hai Zhang's back, there was a huge cut made by a sharp weapon. Moreover, this cut did not seem to have any intention of recovering. It was still scarlet red. From the looks of it, Old Hai Zhang had also used some methods to stop the bleeding. Otherwise, Old Hai Zhang would have already died from excessive blood loss. The disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion are good at using internal force to attach to their weapons, and most of them use swords. Once the internal force causes injuries on the human body, it will directly attach to the wound. As long as the internal force is not obliterated, the wound will never recover. The injury on Old Man Hai's body was caused when he broke through the border guard of the Blood Cloak Pavilion in the Wind Country. Presumably, this is enough to prove that the Blood Cloak Pavilion has already reached the Wind Country, right? Chapter 793. Gaara's heavy news directly hit everyone's head, but except for Kitsuchi, the spokesperson of the Earth Country, who seemed to have lost his soul because of Gaara's news. The other 3 ninja villages didn't have any particularly obvious reaction. As mentioned before, the ones who died were the Wind Country and the Earth Country. Such a situation has a lot to do with the other countries and several ninja villages. They only care about their own interests. How much benefit can rescuing the Wind Country and the Earth Country bring them? Originally, Gaara was actually looking forward to being a member of the Ninja Coalition. At this moment, the other ninja villages that stayed out of this matter could directly express their feelings for their allies here. But unfortunately, there was only endless indifference in front of Gaara. "I don't know what you plan to do after hearing such news?" Looking at Orochimaru, Mei, and standing in front of him, Gaara asked directly, obviously hoping that they could give him a direct answer here. The geographical location of the water country itself was very special. The isolated water country was actually quite self-sufficient. Therefore, Terumi Mei, who represented the interests of the water country, felt Gaara's gaze at this moment. She averted her gaze because she was afraid of meeting Gaara's gaze. She had to show Gaara the attitude of the water country and the mist village. Compared to the water country, the fire country and the lightning country bordered the wind country and the earth country that were being attacked by the blood-clothed pavilion at this moment. Although the 2 countries can take advantage of the situation of the Wind Country and the Earth Country being invaded to directly ask for more from the 2 countries, it's naturally better to swallow the fat meat in their own mouth than to put it in the hands of others. No one can resist the temptation of expanding their territory because such an act is a political victory, a military victory, and a victory that is enough to be remembered in history. As the Raikage of the Cloud Village in the Land of Lightning, unlike his rough appearance, the 4th Raikage AI is a person with great ambition. The country of Earth and the country of Lightning had a long-standing grudge against each other. AI's father had even died in the country of Earth's trap. Being able to kill such an enemy was simply an irresistible temptation for AI. Although Orochimaru didn't really want to join the Woodleaf Village, at this moment, Orochimaru had to represent the interests of the Woodleaf Village and began to think about the pros and cons. As long as the interests of the Woodleaf Village are not damaged, it doesn't hurt. As long as the interests of the Woodleaf Village are not damaged, it's enough. Moreover, after the Windstorm Watergate awakens, if he also makes up his mind to annex the Wind Country, it's not a bad thing for Orochimaru. After all, whether the Fire Country can take the Wind Country from the hands of the Blood-Clothed Pavilion or not, once the war starts, Orochimaru will have more materials to conduct his own research. The Wood Leaf Village will also have to do its best to support his research because of the war to enhance its combatability. Even if the war hasn't started, large-scale military reserves will definitely be carried out. Orochimaru can still get enough resources from the hands of the Wood Leaf Village to ensure his status and research with peace of mind. Looking at Terumi dodging left and right, and looking at Orochimaru and AI's flickering eyes full of ambition, Gaara knew that he has parted ways with these people to a certain extent. In this case, Gaara naturally won't waste his breath here with the ninja allied forces. Instead, he directly returned to the Sunagakure camp without saying a word. At this moment, Sunagakure was also directly ready to leave the ninja allied forces camp. Although Kitsuchi, as the agent of Iwagakure, couldn't completely make the decision for Iwagakure at this moment, he also knew that the other villages can't be counted on at this moment. He directly returned to his camp and told the higher-ups of Iwagakure about the reality of the situation. He directly went to the Ninja Allied Forces camp where the wounded were recuperating and picked up Inoki, who was in a coma. It didn't take long for them to leave the Ninja Allied Forces camp. Watching the two villages of the Earth Country and the Wind Country leave the Ninja Allied Forces camp one after another, Orochimaru also looked at Terumi and AI standing opposite him and said, "It seems that it's unrealistic to expect Sunagakure and Iwagakure to fight with us against the Bloodcloak Pavilion. I don't know what you two think. I think if we directly gather our most powerful forces at this time and launch a direct attack on the Bloodcloak Pavilion's camp, there is a great possibility that we can directly kill Nangongja and make the Bloodcloak Pavilion leaderless, making it easier for us to act in the future." Orochimaru's voice at this moment was full of undisguised temptation. It seemed that he really hoped that Terumi and AI could directly attack the Bloodcloak Pavilion with Woodleaf Village. In fact, what Orochimaru said at this moment was very tempting, but thinking that it was because of Orochimaru that the Bloodcloak Pavilion got enough opportunities to attack the Wind Country and Earth Country, and Orochimaru's expression at this moment made them feel uneasy. Although Terumi didn't directly refuse, after returning to their camp, they directly began to order to be ready to evacuate at any time. Looking at Terumi and AI leaving, Orochimaru's mouth directly raised a mocking smile. "But they're all cowards. They were just slightly stimulated by my attitude, so they went back directly. Little did they know that your moment of hesitation and even giving up actually gave the Bloodcloak Pavilion a rare opportunity. Ha ha ha. I hope that with the participation of the Bloodcloak Pavilion, this world won't be as boring as before, and will become more colorful. What kind of sparks will blossom from the collision between a ninja and an internal force cultivator? Is Sasuke's choice right or wrong? It's really interesting to the extreme. Looking at the big tent of the ninja allied forces that was originally filled with heroes from all walks of life, at this moment, only sand and desolate tables and chairs were left on the ground. Orochimaru not only didn't feel nostalgic, but instead, his eyes became even brighter. At this moment, Orochimaru was quite a bit like Uchiha Madara, but the goals of the two were different. In comparison, Orochimaru's goal wasn't so much of a rebellion, and it was easier to succeed. Chapter 794. In the Bloodcloak Pavilion camp, Nangongja looked at the disciples of the Bloodcloak Pavilion who had completely evacuated, and then looked at the last piece of information in his hand, with an imperceptible smile on the corner of his mouth. The information written on this piece of information was actually very simple. It was a piece of information about Sunagakure's old man, Hai Laozo, entering the Ninja Allied Forces camp. In fact, after seeing such information, Nangongja knew that the Bloodcloak Pavilion's victory was already in their hands. No matter what decision the Ninja Allied Forces makes, or what decision the people of Iwagakure and Sunagakure make, they can no longer stop the Bloodcloak Pavilion's plan from being completed. Everything has come to an end. Putting the paper in his hand on the oil lamp, the flammable paper was directly burned by the flames at this moment. Throwing the burning paper casually, Nangongja said to Mashiro, who was standing beside him, "Mashiro, it seems that it's time to leave." Nangongja put his hand on the hilt of the Sword of Heaven's Tribulation, injecting a large amount of his internal strength into the sword, and constantly guiding the force of nature into the sword. A very mysterious wave was directly emitted from the sword. Pulling the sword out of the scabbard, the internal strength and force of nature that had been accumulated in the sword directly burst out at this moment. The two forces collided and directly tore a small crack in the world barrier. Stretching out his hand, Mashiro also tacitly stretched his hand directly into Nangong's hand. Looking at Mashiro, the smile on Nangong's face became more intense. Holding Mashiro's hand tightly, Nangongja directly pulled Mashiro into the space gap created by Nangongja. When Nangongja and Mashiro's figures disappeared, the flame on the burning paper that Nangongja threw out didn't extinguish. Instead, it spread directly after touching the ground. That's right, after all the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion evacuated, the entire Blood Cloak Pavilion camp was directly filled with flammable materials. Nangongja was actually prepared for both sides. Once the ninja allied forces launched an attack on the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Nangongja could use these flammable materials to directly cause the final damage to the ninja allied forces before leaving. However, after waiting for so long, the ninja allied forces still didn't attack the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Nangongja was also too lazy to wait for the ninja allied forces to make a move. After all, such a sudden attack may cause enough damage to ordinary troops, but it was still slightly inferior to the ninja allied forces that could use various types of ninjutsu. After using water-release ninjutsu and earth-release ninjutsu, this kind of ordinary fire could be quickly controlled. The more he thought about it, the more Nangongja felt that staying here was simply a waste of time. Therefore, after thinking about it for a while, Nangongja directly made up his mind to directly go to the battlefield of the Wind Country and the Earth Country to command on the spot. The flame spread directly in all directions. Whenever the flame passed through a Blood Cloak Pavilion camp, it would be directly stimulated by the flammable materials inside and become more violent. After a while, the flame had become so big that even though it was still daytime, it was still so conspicuous. The ninjas in the ninja allied forces were not incompetent. Because of the sudden departure of Sand and Rock Village, there were some discordant voices in the ninja allied forces. But in the face of foreign enemies, the ninja allied forces were still united. Almost after discovering that the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp suddenly had a big fire, the ninja allied forces immediately came to the vicinity of the Blood Cloak Pavilion to investigate. Because of the obstruction of the fire, the advanced troops sent by the ninja allied forces couldn't directly invade for a while. After discovering such a situation, they immediately reported it to the ninja allied forces headquarters. The Mist also immediately sent a team of water ninjas directly to the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp. The 4 water release ninjas worked together to cast the water release ninjutsu. Although the fire was very big, after the efforts of the 4 of them, the fire was quickly extinguished, revealing the ruins of the building. Judging from the residue, it can be judged that there is no trace of human activity in the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp. The disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion have obviously left the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp in advance. The advanced troops of the ninja allied forces were very agile and directly cleaned up the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp, which had been turned into a charred black area, and directly found no less than 20 tunnels. These tunnels lead to everywhere. Obviously, the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion also directly left the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp in such a primitive but difficult-to-find way. Orochimaru, Terumi Mei, and AI also hurriedly came to the hinterland of the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp. Seeing the ashes and the more than 20 tunnels left by the Blood Cloak Pavilion, their faces became very strange in an instant. Who would have thought that the Blood Garment Pavilion would use such a primitive method to quietly leave the camp and launch a sneak attack on the Kingdom of Wind and Kingdom of Earth? Damn it! AI was burning with anger at this moment, and directly punched a burned pillar. The pillar that was burned by the flames became extremely fragile at this moment, and AI's bombardment directly smashed such a pillar into pieces. Terumi Mei's face was gloomy at this moment, and she didn't say a word with a cold face. On the contrary, Orochimaru, who has always been called Lang Kuan, had a relaxed look on his face at this moment, and even had a slight smile on his face. It was as if he had suddenly discovered someone else's cheating method when playing a game with others. He had a sense of excitement as if he had discovered someone else's secret. Such a battle ended with the silence of the ninja allied forces and the withdrawal of the Bloodcloak Pavilion, but there is no doubt that the Bloodcloak Pavilion has become the winner of such a battle. With such a battle, the Bloodcloak Pavilion has directly taken the Wind and Earth country into their own hands. As long as they can block the final counterattack of Sunagakure and Iwagakure, the Bloodcloak Pavilion's plan can be considered to have been implemented. On the contrary, the ninja allied forces suffered heavy losses at this moment, and directly lost 2 allies, and there was no gain at all, which made everyone in the ninja allied forces very angry, but there was nothing they could do. Chapter 795. Although Sunagakure and Iwagakure's counterattack had a certain impact on the Bloodcloak Pavilion's defense, it didn't cause too much trouble. Gaara and Kitsuchi went to Woodleaf Village and Mist Village respectively. After all, the relationship between Sunagakure and Woodleaf Village was very good, and there was a deep hatred between the Earth and Lightning Country, so they could only choose the Water Country, which had a relatively good relationship with them. Facing the remnants of Sunagakure and Iwagakure, the Fire and Water Country welcomed them with open arms. After all, each country suffered a certain degree of loss in the previous battle. They needed some time to recover their strength and heal their wounds. Sunagakure and Iwagakure lost their homeland, so Woodleaf Village and Mist Village were happy to directly absorb all of them into their own system. Once Sunagakure and Iwagakure were integrated into such a system, it only took a little bit of effort to absorb these 2 forces into their own ninja village. At this moment, Nangongja sat on the throne in the middle of the palace of the country of Earth. He looked at the 5 elemental altar lords and the many Bloodcloak Pavilion disciples who had performed outstandingly in the battle before him. Just a moment ago, Nangongja had given out rewards to these people. When everyone's rewards were over, Nangongja also stood up from his seat and swept his eyes across the faces of the numerous disciples standing in front of him. Nangongja also cleared his throat and said to everyone, "Brother Liu, I'm going to give you a reward. I started as an orphan in a small village, and by chance, I received the inheritance of internal strength. But although I received the inheritance of internal strength, it still didn't change the fact that I was an orphan with no one to rely on. Back then, my sister and I were squeezed together in a small room, worrying about our livelihood every day. My biggest wish at that time was to learn a way to feed me and my sister from the small town where we lived, and then eat meat whenever we want." Nangongja said, and everything he experienced slowly passed through his eyes. Nangongro, who was also standing in the hall, looked at her brother who was standing taller than everyone else. At this moment, her eyes were slowly filled with tears, remembering the simple and difficult times of those years. Later, when I had some achievements in my cultivation, I began to have an idea in my mind. Can I make use of my cultivation to make a living? In the ninja world, there are many ways to make money by violence, but there are only a few ways to accept my strength at that time. In the end, I chose to find a way to become a ninja. At that time, in the small town where I lived, there happened to be a Hitaki from the Woodleaf Village, and under his recommendation, I became a ninja in the Woodleaf Village, one of the 5 most famous ninja villages in the ninja world. Thanks to the blacksmith shop owner in the small town, Uncle Hitaki, who gave me the opportunity to go to the Woodleaf Village. Although I became a ninja and earned a lot of money from the missions, but at the same time I also paid a lot of price. I had to use a lot of dirty means against my heart to complete my missions. The blood in my hands became more and more, and I also got the nickname Yama in the ninja world. Perhaps for others, such a title is an extremely glorious thing, but for me, it reminded me again and again of the fact that I am a murderous devil. Killing people is not a sinful thing because in an environment like the ninja world, as long as you want to protect yourself, you have to kill people for various reasons. But when you go against your heart and kill people for no reason, just to ensure that you can get money, the guilt becomes stronger and stronger. But I have no choice, I can only kill people because if I don't kill people, I can't live. Perhaps it was because he went against his heart again and again that Nangongja finally chose to give up the identity of a ninja. But this period of time as a ninja was not just simple torture for me. It was because of this period of time that I was able to get friends and my other 2 family members Mashiro and Little Linger. It was because of my sister Nangongro, my family members Mashiro and little Linger, that I was able to not let the guilt in my heart directly devour my heart. With that, Nangong's eyes also became unprecedentedly gentle, looking at the 3 family members he mentioned. But in the end, because of various reasons, I couldn't stay in the Woodleaf village anymore. In order to protect myself and the responsibility of the Sword of Heaven's retribution, I came to the Bloodcloak Pavilion and passed the path of dragonization step by step to become the leader of the Bloodcloak Pavilion. I have never liked to take responsibility so much, so I directly added such a heavy burden on my shoulders. Step by step, I've been carrying such a heavy burden all the way to where I am now. The Bloodcloak Pavilion also directly became a giant in the ninja world step by step from a hidden force. From now on, internal force cultivators will no longer be ignored. We proved to the whole world that internal force cultivators are not worse than ninjas, and even better than them. Today, we have rewarded all the people who have made contributions, and I believe that most people have also received the rewards they deserve. From today on, the Bloodcloak Pavilion officially stands in the ninja world and becomes an existence that everyone in the ninja world needs to look up to. This is my Bloodcloak Pavilion. This is our Bloodcloak Pavilion. From today on, all the disciples of the Bloodcloak Pavilion will be proud to be a member of the Bloodcloak Pavilion. Now, let us all rejoice in our victory. All of this is what we have won with our own sweat, with our own blood, and with our own lives. Nangongja held the Sword of Heaven's retribution in his hand and directly raised it high. And in Nangongja's eyes, tears were flowing, and there was no way to stop. The book was finished. You're tuning in to the Legend of the Vagabond YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.